Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for holding this hearing. This is, as you said, examining the state and forensic science and related standards and the challenges facing the forensic science community. Popular television shows like CSI, NCIS, and Law and Order, to name a few, which I know the Chairman TiVos, have showcased the role that forensic science can play in helping law enforcement carry out investigations and convict criminals. However, these shows can also create the misimpression that all courtroom evidence that's presented as scientific evidence has been subjected to high-tech, foolproof analysis, and that every state and local crime lab around the country has easy access to these sophisticated lab technologies. Unfortunately, this is not always the case. A National Academy's report issued 4 years ago raised serious concerns about the state of forensic science and, among other things, called for structural reforms in new research. While the forensic science community did not embrace all of the report's reform recommendations, there seems to be general agreement that law enforcement, prosecutors, and crime labs would benefit from greater research and training efforts to increase crime lab capacity and accuracy and to strengthen the scientific foundations of forensic science. For instance, advances in forensic DNA analysis have improved the strength of evidence that can put criminals behind bars and also clear the innocent. However, as we explore ways to improve forensic science, we must be careful not to undermine or threaten the ability of local prosecutors and other law enforcement professionals to prosecute cases by fostering unrealistic expectations that every case can be solved through science. We must also avoid unintentionally and undeservedly casting doubt on the good work that the vast majority of practitioners perform. Federal efforts to improve forensic science should not, or I should say, should utilize input from and be cognizant of the needs of state and local practitioners in both the forensic and law enforcement fields. I would like to hear today about the extent of involvement of state and local practitioners in the National Commission on Forensic Science, recently established by the administration. Along those same lines, I would like to hear the witnesses' views about how to best leverage existing federal efforts and long-standing partnerships with state and local forensic scientists to improve forensic sciences. I also look forward to hearing your thoughts about what the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, under this committee's jurisdiction could do to advance forensic science standards and how the Department of Justice and NIST could best work together to enhance both public safety and confidence in our system of justice. So I look forward to hearing the testimony of our witnesses today. I would also like to thank all the witnesses for being here, some of whom have flown in from across the country and even from abroad. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Briggs, in your testimony, you expressed concerns about the charter of the new National Commission. Again, I would just ask you if you could elaborate a little bit on those concerns, specifically with regard to the participation opportunities for state and local practitioners.
We do applaud the executive branch for taking a leadership role in the National Commission on Forensic Science, although we feel that it would be best to have an Office of Forensic Science under the Department of Justice, since that is a judicial system where we apply forensics. But with the issue of the National Commission, where we see two key important things that concern us are, one, the imposed FACA rules. This means that state and locals will not have a way of vetting what comes out of that commission. So when you talk about research and you talk about presenting research and you present it to different conferences, what you're doing is you're getting feedback from other parties so that you can have questions regarding the research. This is not going to happen on anything that comes out of those commissions because of the FACA rules imposed on that for state and local community. We want to see what comes out of that commission and vet it before it's imposed. Secondly, we feel strongly regarding digital evidence. Digital evidence under that charter will not be looked at as a forensic discipline. If you look at the crime laboratories across the country, digital evidence is one of the places where we have a backlog of cases. It's one of the booming things that we see in our forensic caseload. I believe the Netherlands paper also talked about that. So not to include that as far as research, training, standard setting, to us brings harm to the discipline of digital evidence.
Good. To your knowledge, how much does it cost to operate the scientific working groups at DOJ?
Approximately $150,000 was the cost to operate the scientific working group on the DNA analytical methods.
And how does that compare to the funding the administration has proposed for NIST to do its own standards-related work?
As opposed to funding for NIST, NIST has been allocated at $3 million looking at the new budget if that were to go through.
Are those duplicative efforts? I mean, do they actually serve different, or do they serve complementary purposes?
They serve differently in that NIST will be starting scientific guidance groups, which will actually reinvent and take over those SWIGs and redo the standards. And we feel that while NIST should play a part in the SWIGs, it should not take those standards and redo them.
The National Academy's report recommended, and I quote, that forensic science laboratories should be independent of or autonomous within law enforcement agencies, end quote. How do you foster that sort of administrative independence at your lab?
We foster that by ISO accreditation, accreditation to the ISO 17025 standards. Within those standards are in standard 4.0, when an assessment or an audit is done, the laboratory will be looked at in regards to those particular standards. One is, does everybody understand their role, the parent organization as well as the crime laboratory? 2 is an autonomous relationship. 3 is there undue influence. And 4 is policies and procedures, do they identify bias? We also do this by every case that goes out the door is technically reviewed and administratively reviewed. Do the results in the case notes support the conclusions? Also, remember, the notes are also discoverable, as well as we encourage prosecutors and defense attorneys to sit down with the criminalists and go through the case before they even go to court. Also, one of the other ways that we do it is through, again, discovery. So these are just some of the things that we look at so that there is undue influence and bias. We also train our criminalists in bias. We train them in ethics. That's part of our accreditation also.
Mr. Chinitsoy, the fragmentation that you refer to in your testimony seems to be inherent and fundamental to our country's system of state and local jurisdictions. How does the criminal justice system and forensic science infrastructure in the Netherlands differ from that here in the United States?
Well, it's a small country, Senator. That helps, but also we do have other organizations within the Netherlands that do forensic investigations. The NFI, though, is the prime service provider, so to speak, for law enforcement agencies. And we are, however, independent of them. And we also do cases for other countries, and we also do cases for other government agencies than just the law enforcement agencies.
Can you describe the work that you've done with NIST on behalf of the NFI?
Well, actually, that is just starting up right now, and actually later this week or next week we will have discussions with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there is a memorandum of agreement
Yes.
on that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that hasn't really gotten underway yet or commenced?
Well, we have to define what exactly we're going to do, but standard setting. From our point of view, we, as a forensic community, we have a standards problem. And we want to solve that and want to work on that very hard. And we know that NIST is absolutely top-notch organization, state-of-the-art worldwide. And this is why we try to get in contact with them, and they were interested as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, my time's expired. Thank you.